All right, so good morning. Today we'll continue to discuss the nature of verbs from a synthetical perspective. I'm going to show you the slides here. I think they are already being shown. So we discussed in the class before that we have 6 verb forms, and I'd like to recall you and draw your attention to the fact that verb forms are not the same as verb shapes. Can you recall the difference? Can you tell me the difference between verb form and verb shape? They have something to do with homophony, for example. There are 2 cases in which we have different verb forms, but the verb shape is the same. Do you remember what they are?
Professor, não tô lembrando agora.
Okay, I'll recall you, don't worry.
Eu tô um pouco perdida porque eu não assisti a última aula e eu
Ah,
soube
I
que
see.
você começou um assunto novo. Eu tava preocupada com o seminário,
I see.
de não enlouquecendo as pessoas, né? Aí, aí eu não consegui assistir nesse dia.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Well, the class is available on Siga. In fact, it's available on
Ok.
YouTube. I have to put the link on Siga. But if you sign to
Tá,
the channel, you may have already seen a notification that the class is available. Anyway, I'll
sim.
put the link on Siga too.
Tá
Uh, so let's go for a brief review. Okay, I introduced you to verbs. And I told you that the great majority of verb lexemes have 6 inflectional forms. Now, when I talk about form, it's a great idea to go back in this subject to the morphology part to remember that morpheme is the same as form. Remember that? Morpheme is all about form. So saying that verbs have 6 inflectional forms means that verbs have 6 inflectional morphemes. Okay? Uh, so a form is a kind of a primary function of the verbs. Okay, so we have the preterite, we have the third present singular person, we have the plain present, the plain form, the gerund participle, and past participle. So these are the 6 verb forms. But if you take a look at the preterite, checked, and the past participle, checked, you will see that although we have 2 different forms, because these are 2 different morphemes, the morpheme for preterite and the morpheme for participle, there is a coincidence that the spelling is exactly the same. So this is verb shape. The shape is the same. When I mean shape, I mean the spelling. But the form is different because form is morpheme. And if you take a look at checked here in the preterite and checked here in the past participle, they are different morphemes because they have different grammatical functions. They are just coincident in spelling and sound, so they are homophones. Verb forms are the primary function of the verb. Verb shape is the way it's spelled. Okay. The same happens in plain present. They check the figures themselves, check. And the plain form, she may check the figures herself. Check, check, and check. But here I have simple present. And here I have a modelized present. I have a present tense introduced by an auxiliary modal verb may. This happens with should, could, can, ought to, might, and all the other verbs. So this is the plain form that most textbooks also call the infinitive without to. Infinitive without to is a kind of way to make it easy for students to memorize the shape or the form, okay? But it's not technically accurate. So we call it the plain form. And we call this the plain present, okay? Simple present. In simple present, we use the plain present. In modal sentences and clauses, we use the plain form, okay? I will go to the movies tomorrow. This will have the auxiliary will in this future construction. This go is not in the plain present because it's not even present, it's future. So instead, I'm using the plain form. But when I say Delciane and Lohane go to literature classes every day, in this case, I'm using plain present because there is no auxiliary verb. So plain form happens when an auxiliary verb happens together. And plain present is when it's in simple present. Okay. So for now, I want you to memorize. We have more verb forms than verb shapes. We have 6 verb forms and we have 4 verb shapes. And when I say this, I'm considering regular verbs because with irregular verbs, it's somehow different. Because, for example, the verb to awake, we have awaken and awaken, but it's not the final ed. But taken, take, for example, we have took and taken. Took is the preterite. She took my money, and we have the past participle. My money was taken by her. And then we have different forms and different shapes. So when I say 6 forms and 4 shapes, I'm always talking about regular verbs. Irregular verbs have a different behavior. Okay, is it somehow explained the difference between form and shape? Form refers to function, whereas shape will refer to spelling, okay? Considering regular verbs. So if you are in doubt with this, you can always take a look at the class before and maybe write me an email with questions, okay? But what I want to make a difference now is that form is not shape. And I make it clear here. We have 6 different forms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But we have only 4 shapes checked in 1 and 6, checks in 2, check in 3 and 4, and checking, which is the gerund participle used for continuous verb tenses or for participle, present participle verb tenses, okay? So the plain form of the verb is identical with the lexical base of the word. What do I mean by that? The plain form of the verb to go is go. The plain form of the verb to stay is stay. The plain form of the verb to watch is watch. The plain form of the verb to fix is fix. All right? So the plain form is not inflected with tense. Okay? It's not inflected with tense. Some verb that we are going to discuss in the future, the auxiliary verb, will play the role of inflection. The plain form will always appear in its brute form, okay? In its raw form. You get it? Plain form of the verb to something is something, okay? Now, the plain present is inflected, although sometimes you don't see the inflectional morpheme, and it will be somehow coincident with the plain form, but it's the plain present. How do you know it's the plain present or the plain form? Well, if the sentence is in simple present, the verb should be in the plain present. Unless it's an interrogative. Because when it's an interrogative, the conjugation goes to the auxiliary verb do or does, okay? So the plain present is inflected for tense and also identical with the lexical base. That's why their spelling is coincident. And it usually indicates present time. So it's used in the present tense in either plural, first person, and second person. And the only exception for this is be, because in be we have a third shape, I am. He, she, it is, which is the third present singular, and the rest of the persons are. So in be we have three forms, okay? We have three shapes, but we have in other verbs two shapes for the same form, okay?
Ok,
By
professor.
shape, what do we mean by shape for you to understand? By shape, we mean the spelling or pronunciation. Consequently, the preterite and past participle of the lexeme check have the same shape as do the plain present tense and the plain form. This is true to all regular verbs. That's it. Shape, checked, equals to checked. Form, checked, is different from had checked, because this checked here, this final morpheme here is a final morpheme, is a suffix for participle, past participle, whereas this final morpheme, this suffix ed here, is a suffix for the preterite. I heard you were going to say something. You can speak. Any questions?
Não, professor, eu entendi.
Okay, good.
Eu
So
também.
let's move forward. So there are a good number of irregular verbs where the preterite and past participle do not have the same shape. I gave you the example of take. She took message. Message was taken by her. Let's imagine that we don't know that take is an irregular verb. Let's make the same mistakes an elementary student would make and not look at the irregular verbs list. Let's consider take, take it, take it. Suppose, okay, it's ungrammatical. I know it's ungrammatical, but let's suppose it. Then it would be coincident. Okay. Let's, for example, take the case of the verb to read. Okay. Which has the same shape for both preterite and participle. She read the message. The message was read by her. In this case, even being an irregular verb, there is a coincidence in shape. In the case of take, it's different because the preterite of take is took, but the participle of take, the past participle, is taken. So it is very easy to decide whether any particular instance of the shape check is a preterite form or a past participle, because there's a difference in spelling. So what you need to do is ask which form of the verb like take would be needed in the construction in question. Let's consider this case. She may have checked the figure herself. Sorry. Now, change it for take. She may have taken the figures herself. So this final ed here is a participle morpheme. Why? Because if I change it for the verb to take, it will appear taken because of the determination of the have. The auxiliary have will require me to use the past participle shape. Okay? So this is past participle. And this checked is also past participle. Take a look at this. I'm not sure whether she checked the figures herself or not. Well, change the verb to check for the verb to take. What do you have? I'm not sure whether she took or whether she taken the figures. What do you think?
Took.
Took. So is this preterite or past participle? Is this checked here? Is this finally D? Here, that you can see here. A preterite particle, a preterite suffix, or a past participle suffix?
It's preterite.
That's great. This is a preterite. You see, this is a kind of hint to decide whether it's preterite or past participle, okay? So this is where we stopped last class, okay? So let's now review the 6 verb forms and their applications, okay? Remember, verb form is not verb tense. So we are talking about verb forms from the perspective of what they are not. Verb forms are not verb shapes. It's the same as to say verb forms do not have anything to do with the spelling. They have to do with the morphological function. This is information number 1. Information number 2, verb form is not verb tense. Why? Because with one verb form, I can come up with 2 different verb tenses. I'll give you an example. Teach. The gerund participle for teach is teaching. Sentence number 1. Let's imagine a sentence like this. I was teaching when she called me. What verb tense is this? Let me share the Microsoft Word with you. Just a moment. One moment. Take a look at this. I was teaching when she called me. This is sentence number 1. Let's call it A. By this time tomorrow, I will not be teaching. This is sentence B. Let's call it B. I'm teaching remotely because of a pandemic. Is it C? Oops, it's not copyright. I see, just C. Okay, so let's take a look at these 3 sentences and what do they have in common? What do all these sentences have in common? They have teaching,
Eles estão usando o verbo teach no gerúndio.
Yes, we have a gerund participle form. Gerund participle form. I mean, ing participle morpheme, gerund participle morpheme, in 3 cases. In these 3 cases, what I have here is exactly the same suffix, the same inflectional suffix, the same ing. In all these cases, I have continuous tenses. So I have the same shape because I have the same spelling. I have the same form because the 3 of them are in the gerund participle. However, I have 3 different verb tenses. Do you agree with me? What verb tense is this? It's something
Is
in the gerund,
is
or
past.
yeah, we
Is
call the gerund the continuous tenses. What continuous tense is this?
mm,
Past continuous.
That's it. Why past continuous? When I was an intermediate teacher in Language Institute, I used to give my students a kind of strategy to discover the nomenclature of verb tenses. Why is it called past continuous? It's very difficult for us to understand these verb tenses by their names only because a grammar book tells us so. We should have a strategy to understand it. So why past continuous? Because it's the past of be and the continuous of the main verb, which means ing. So to be in the past plus a verb in ing. Now, how about this? Which verb tense is this? Consider just the part after the comma. Which verb tense is this? What is it called?
I think
Future continuous.
That's it. Future of be in purple. Continuous of the main verb. Now this one is pretty easy. Which verb tense is this?
Present continuous.
And how would you create a sentence in the future perfect continuous? Well, future, will, perfect, have plus a participle, continuous. I need an ing. So I will have ought or no, this would be future perfect. I'll have thoughts. No, não. Forget about it. Se eu ficar destrinchando isso aqui, eu vou complicar mais. Future perfect continuous. I will have been. Gosh. Já fui, agora eu tenho que ir, né? Já mencionei examples. Future perfect continuous tense. By this time next year, I'll be finishing my graduation. É isso aí que é o future perfect continuous. Okay, I will have been reading. I will have Zoom. Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. I will have read 45 books by Christmas. Now this is future perfect, but not future perfect continuous. Here, you establish a period in the future with a beginning and an end, and something will be simultaneous to November. In November, I will have been working at my company for 3 years. So, future of the auxiliary verb will have. Perfect because of the participle of the verb to be. And continuous because it's the gerund participle of the main verb. At 5 o'clock, I will have been waiting for 30 minutes. So, will have future of the auxiliary verb have. Perfect is the participle of the verb to be. And continuous because it's the gerund participle of the ing. So what I mean here by this incursion in very hard verb tenses is just to let you know that every verb tense nomenclature has a reason to be like that. Future, perfect, continuous. Future of have, the perfect, that is also the participle of the verb to be, and continuous is the ing form called technically the gerund participle. Okay, but let's stick to these three examples, A, B, and C. So we have the same shape, the same form, but three different verb tenses. Do you agree with that? That we have three different verb tenses?
Yes.
So we have a second piece of information here. Verb tenses are not verb forms. So verb forms are not verb shapes, and verb forms are not verb tenses either. Verb tenses are a result of the combination of the six basic verb forms. If you know the six basic verb forms, you can build up any sentence in any verb tense in English. Out of the combination of these six forms, the way they are combined can come up with various verb tenses. Okay, we have much more than six verb tenses in English. Present. How many presents do you know? Simple present, present continuous, present perfect. You see? How many pasts do you know? Simple past, past perfect, past continuous. You see? So are you convinced that verb
Yes.
form is not verb tense? Consider like this. Verb tense is a wall. Verb form is a brick. Okay, if you can associate with this metaphor. So verb form is the raw material for verb tenses. Okay? So let's talk about the six verb forms. The first one is the preterite. The preterite is coincident with a type of past tense. I mean, when I say it's coincident, I don't say it is the past tense. It happens to have the same shape. Okay, so this is coincident with a type of past tense. In this case, the simplest one, the type where the past tense is marked inflectionally rather than by means of an auxiliary verb. Instead of using an auxiliary verb as you do, for example, with was in past continuous, I was watching TV when she arrived. You just inflect the verb. I watched TV yesterday. You use the final ed and that's all right. So many grammars use the more general term past tense, okay, instead of preterite. But we prefer to make a distinction between preterite and past tense because one of them is a tense and the other is the form. The preterite is the form. Past is the verb tense. Simple past is a verb tense. So we prefer to the more specific term, preterite form, to distinguish it from the construction where the auxiliary have marks the other kind of past tense, as in she has checked the proofs. Although it's named present perfect is not a present tense. It is the present of the verb to have plus the perfect of the verb to check. By the perfect of the verb to check, I mean the past participle of the verb to check. And if it's the past participle, although the nomenclature is present perfect, it's something related to the past. Not any kind of past. When do we use past present perfect? We use present perfect. One of the cases that we use present perfect is when we talk about some event in the past that still has an influence in the present. Jair Bolsonaro has been elected in 2018. So he is now the president. There is a present consequence. This is one of the applications. Some other books will say we use simple past when the action when the action is important and time is not relevant. I wouldn't say so. I would analyze it as a matter of cause and consequence, something that happened in the past and has an influence in the present. Now, B and C are the present tense forms. When I mean B and C, I mean the second and the third column in this chart. Oops, sorry. The chart will appear in the next slide. B and C, the present tense forms, okay, there are two, the third person and the others, except for to be. To be has the I am thing that makes it a little bit different from the other verbs. So there are two present tense forms, one for third person singular and one that occurs with any other subject, first person, second person, or the plural persons. So we call them the non-third person singular form or plain present form. Okay, some people call it non-third person form. Others will call the plain present form. Okay, but it's the same thing. It indicates that it is identical with the morphological base of the lexeme. Oh, it's very complicated way of speaking. It's equals to the name of the verb. Okay, or what we call the infinitive without to. The plain present is what people normally call infinitive without to. Okay, so we have B and C. B, the present tense forms, one for third person singular, another one for non-third person, and the plain present. Plain present equals to infinitive without to. The plain form is also identical with the lexical base. Okay. It's similar to the infinitive without to, but it's not a present tense. It is used in three constructions, which are not present tenses. In the imperative, please do it. Please read the chart. These are all imperatives. Please check the figures yourself. Please go there. You see? So imperatives will always use the plain form. The infinitival sentences and the subjunctive. Oh, this is horrible. We are going to discuss this. This seems unnatural sometimes. Well, infinitival sentences are sentences like, it's better to check the figures yourself, oneself. This check here is the plain form. Okay, it's better to check. Okay, this to is part of the structure. It's not part of the verb form. Okay, it's better to check the figures oneself. I will check them myself. This is the plain form. It's used for future. It's used in questions in the present. Do you check? Okay, so in this case, you are using the plain form, and the conjugation is in charge of the auxiliary verb. And finally, the subjunctive. The subjunctive is used in constructions like it's important that, it's essential that, it's required that she check the figures herself. Many basic students are led to the mistake of considering that this is ungrammatical. Most of them will say, no, teacher, this is not grammatical. This is wrong because should be she checks. Well, if this sentence here, if you by misinterpreting the verb tense here, consider to be a present tense, then there should be an S here for concordance of third person she. The problem is that the sentence is not a present sentence. It's a subjunctive sentence. And it comes with constructions like it's important that, it's essential that, it's required that, or it's better be safe than sorry. Okay, it's better be honest than dishonest. So it's is, yeah, but instead you use it's and be, the plain form. Okay, so this is called the subjunctive. When you have this construction, it's essential that, required that, necessary that, important that, you use the verb. Even if it's an I or a you or a she, he or it, you will always use check, be, go, stay, the plain form. Are you familiar with the subjunctive? Essa é uma construção que vocês veem com frequência?
Não.
Pois é,
Não.
eu fui ver isso, acho que no último livro do avançado. É uma construção que não é muito comum, né? Não é muito usada. Ela é usada quase sempre para essa linguagem de recomendações, né? Ou em ditados populares, tá? O famoso It's better be safe than sorry, que eu mencionei. So, the infinitival construction is very often marked by two. Infinitive. It's better to check the figures, okay? But it is also found without to after such verbs as can, may, will, and do, like in she didn't check the figures herself. In this case, didn't. The conjugation, the inflections take place in the auxiliary verb, and check is preserved in its plain form. Make here, they made me check the figures myself. So when you make someone do something or have someone do something, you probably learn these constructions. To make someone do something is to convince a person to do what you want. To have someone do something is to give someone an order to do what you want. Okay? These two constructions will use a verb in the plain form. So made me do this, made her do this, had her do this. I had her correct the exams for me. So in this case, she had a kind of obligation, either professional or moral, and I gave her an order to correct the exams. I had her correct the exams. Or I made her correct the exams for me. So in this case, I convinced her to correct the exams for me. In both cases, the verb to correct comes in the plain form. Okay. Now it's time to discuss something very interesting about auxiliary verbs. As you can see, I have a verb here, made, and I have another one here, didn't. I'd like to focus here, didn't. She didn't check the figures herself. Well, what is the verb? First of all, in she didn't check the figures herself, how many verbs do you have in this verb capsule? Take this whole sentence. Take this. Let's do some synthetical analysis. How many verbs do you see there in the verb capsule? The subject is she, the predicate is didn't check the figures herself. Now, find me, please, the verb capsule.
Didn't check.
Check.
Didn't check. We have a verb capsule, didn't check, in which the predicator is the most important verb, so it's the verb to check. Check is the predicator. And didn't is what? In fact, did. Yeah, we have did and we have a not. Not is a negative particle. But did, what is the function of did?
Auxiliary verb.
Yes. Well, let's think of the nature of all auxiliary verbs, people, and so on. When you work in an office and there is a manager and there is an auxiliary for this manager, who works the most? The
The
boss or the
auxiliary.
auxiliary? Yeah, é o verbo estagiário. Eu sempre brincava com os meus estudantes de instituto de idioma, eu falava, verbo auxiliar é o estagiário. Ele faz tudo. It's a kind of a joker verb. It's a joker that you have in your sleeve to use in the poker game all the time you would like to. So I need to change the verb tense. Change the auxiliary. I need to produce a negative sentence. Put a not beside the auxiliary verb. I need to ask a question. Invert the auxiliary verb and the subject. So whenever there is an auxiliary, the main verb does not work. In a land of auxiliary verbs, main verbs have nothing to do. They stay relaxed, calm, drinking some coconut water, whereas the auxiliary works a lot. Okay, so this is the nature of auxiliary verbs. Their nature is to work in favor of the main verb. It's to serve. They are kind of servants for the main verb. Okay, it's just a metaphor for you to know that auxiliary verbs will take all the morphemes for verb tense, all the morphemes for negative inflections, and so on. Okay, it will be very important to understand that check here is the plain form. It's not under any kind of conjugation. Did was, okay, did was inflected. Did receive the not the verb to check. The verb to check is in its plain form, is in its brute state. Okay, the same happens to check here. Made was inflected. It's the verb to make. Okay, it was inflected in its past form, made. Right? Do you have any question about what the plain form is?
Não, não
The
agora.
plain form of the verb to blah 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 is blah blah blah. Understood? No. The teacher is getting mad. No. The plain form of the verb X is X. The plain form of the verb be is be. The plain form of the verb A is A. You see? Sometimes it's coincident with the simple present, but it's different. In the simple present, I play tennis. Is this play simple present or plain form? I play tennis.
Repete a pergunta, por favor.
In the construction, in the sentence, I play tennis, the verb play is simple present or plain form?
Simple present.
Why do you know? Because if you change it for she, you have an inflection. She plays tennis. Now, in the sentence, I may play tennis this afternoon, is play plain form or simple present?
Is plain form.
Change for she. She may play tennis this afternoon. Play didn't change, so it's the plain form. I guess you understood the principle of the thing, okay? And sorry for the blah, 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 okay? It's just a way to say any verb will behave like that, okay? The verb that if you create a verb and it's supposedly a verb in English, it should follow this rule. Now, we are almost finishing. We are in the 4th out of 6. About the plain form, we can also say that there are 2 major factors that distinguish the plain form from the plain present. We have the special case of be, because be does not have 2 forms. It has 3. What are the 3 forms of be? We saw that play has 2 forms, plays and play. Go has 2 forms, go and goes. How about be? How many forms are there? Is, am, and are. And all of these are different in shape from the plain form of be. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that in I play tennis and I may play tennis, let's go to word processor. Play tennis. They play tennis this morning. We tend to believe that these guys are the same, but they are not, because we have analyzed this and we said, okay, she plays tennis. So this is plain, sorry, this is simple present. Whereas I may play tennis, she may play tennis. There is no variation, so this is the plain form. Not plain form, plain form. Okay. Now with be, it's a bit different. We have a coincidence between simple present and plain form. Let's use the case of be. I am a teacher. She is a student. Oh gosh. But and would like to be a teacher. Am is these 2 constructions here. They are in simple present, aren't they? I am simple present. She is simple present. But she would like to be is the plain form, a teacher. Okay? She is a student and would like to be a teacher. Or, if you prefer, use are. They are students and would like to be teachers. The same. Plain form, plain present. Okay, the present, plain form, the name of the verb. Okay, so what I mean here in the slide is, in the case of be, there are three present tense forms. Okay, and all of these three forms are not coincident with the plain form of the verb to be, which is be. I don't know why. We always teach the verb to be as the very first verb in English because it's the most complicated one in terms of morphology. It has three different forms: am, is, and are, and its infinitive is not coincident with the present conjugations. So it's hard, but it's like that. So the plain present of the verb to be, its plain present form that appears in the three constructions shown, like be quiet in the imperative, or it's better to be safe than sorry, okay, which is the subjunctive, or I will be ready in no time, which is an infinitival sentence, or it is essential that she be told about it, which is also a subjunctive. Okay. Be appears in situations like this: imperatives, subjunctive, infinitival sentences. Okay. Infinitival sentences are those that result of the use of an auxiliary verb. Okay. And the use of the verb to be in the infinitive form beside an auxiliary verb. Okay. And the plain present is that one that has to agree in third person singular. So plain form does not take any inflection. Take a look at the plain forms here. Be quiet. There's no inflection. The name of the verb is to be. The imperative is be quiet. Or let's take the subjunctive. It's essential that should be told about the situation. We use be. The infinitive of the verb is to be. And we use be in the subjunctive. There is no inflection here. No morpheme, no suffix beside it. Now, in the plain present, okay, there is the matter of agreement. So we need that inflectional morpheme, normally the final S or the ES, you see? So that's why she checks the figures herself and not she check. Whenever I use an asterisk like this, I mean ungrammatical, okay? Or in this case, she will check the figures herself and not she will checks. There is a she here. Some people without a good piece of information would say, oh, she checks. No, no, never. Why not? Because this is not plain present. This is the plain form. And here, why this S? Because it's not the plain form. It's the plain present. This is what I mean by saying that the plain present has to agree in third person singular. Difficult?
Muita coisa pra lembrar, né? Mas não
Watch.
parece tão difícil.
You may watch the video again. I think these slides will be available today as well. But it's not difficult. You have to follow the path of thought, but it's not that hard. Well, the gerund participle. Let's talk about something easy. Yeah. This form always ends in ing. Traditional grammar will make a distinction between two forms with this suffix: the gerund and the present participle. Okay. For example, what is the gerund? When you turn a verb into a noun, when there is a kind of derivational noun forming suffix, ing as a derivational noun forming suffix, like walking late at night can be dangerous. This is a gerund because nobody is walking late at night. the verb to walk was kind of nominalized. It was turned into a noun to serve as the subject of the sentence. Walking late at night can be dangerous. And then traditional grammars, we call it a gerund. Now, present participle is when there are people doing, playing, staying, or anything with ing, performing an action. So people walking late at night must be careful. This is a present participle. There is a subject, which is people, and walking here is treated as a verb in the participle. Look, walking here is treated as the subject of the sentence, and subjects can only be nouns or noun phrases. So walking here is nominalized, serving as a gerund, being classified as a gerund. In the second example, people walking, the subject is people. And walking is a kind of what they are doing. People walking late at night must be careful. So this is people walking late at night is in the present participle. So which of these two is the famous present continuous? The first one in the gerund or the second one that uses present participle? Which of these two sentences would you say is a present continuous sentence? There's something implicit in one of them that will enable us to classify it as present continuous. Maybe if you put a relative clause, you will see it. People who are walking late at night must be careful. We do not have the who, the relative clause, who are here, but it's kind of implicit. People, which people? Those people who are walking late at night must be careful. So a gerund is comparable to a noun, while a participle is comparable to an adjective. Isn't it that happens? A gerund is comparable to a noun, playing the role of a subject. Whereas a participle is comparable to an adjective. People walking late at night. People, but not every people. It's restricting the meaning of people. Only those people who are walking late at night. So it is comparable to an adjective. Do you agree? Do you see this analogy?
Yeah, I got it.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. So there is, however, no verb in English that has distinct forms for the constructions above. So we may have a single form and the name gerund participle. This is our approach. We are justifying our approach here, that there is no difference between gerund and participle in terms of spelling. So we are grouping them together in a category called gerund participle that indicates that it covers both traditional categories. Gerund when it behaves as a noun, and participle when it behaves as an adjective. And we call it the gerund participle form, because there is no distinct form for one or for the other. Okay, it's not a case of homophony. They are all the final ing that we use to either nominalize, and then it's a derivational noun forming suffix, or when it's inflectional, we use it to construct the gerund participle. And finally, the past participle. This is a very close friend of yours. You know it since your basic studies of compound verb tenses in English. The first compound verb tense that you learn is present perfect. So this is used in two main constructions: the perfect constructions and the passive. The perfect, as in she has checked the figures. And the passive, the figures must be checked by the boss. In both sentences here, what I have is a perfect tense in the first one. Why perfect? Because there is a verb to have as an auxiliary verb. Or a passive voice, because I have an inversion and the object of the canonical clause is turned into the subject of a non-canonical clause. In fact, it's the boss that is going to check the figures. But we put the figures as the subject of this sentence. So we have the passive form checked. The perfect is a past tense marked by the auxiliary verb have, while the most straightforward cases of the passive involve the auxiliary verb be. So this is auxiliary, and so is this one. The auxiliary for perfect tenses is have. The auxiliary for passive voice is be. Now we retain the traditional term past participle, though the past component of meaning applies just to the perfect construction. This is due to the fact that most dictionaries and grammar books still refer to this form like that, as past participle, but we could call it just participle, okay? The past component, as I said, of meaning applies just to the perfect construction, okay? Any questions about this past participle form? Why past participle? She had checked, okay? We retain, again, the past participle, the term past participle, the past component of meaning applies just to the perfect construction, the final ed, past component of meaning, okay? This checked here, there's nothing to do with the past, okay? It has to do with passive voice. In the nomenclature, we consider just this one, okay? Let me erase these arrows here. Do you have any question about these 6 verb forms? Vamos tentar nos ater um pouquinho a questões teóricas. Verb form is not. Tell me what verb form is not. Let's see if you got this. This is one of the fundamentals of today's class. Verb forms is not.
Shapes.
And what is shape?
Shapes refers to spelling.
Great. Very good. Information number 1 completed with success. Verb form is not. What else? Verb form is not shape. Okay. Verb form is not but either. Verb form is not. You remembered of verb shape. There's something else that verb form is not.
Peraí, eu tô tentando recuperar na minha memória de 2 megabytes.
que a gente pode fazer com verbos? A gente inflexiona eles para quê? Para concordar ou para gerar? É para concordar também, para concordar com o número, né? Ou para concordar no tempo. Verb form is not verb shape. Verb form is not verb tense either. Now, what's the relationship between verb form and verb tense? Remember a metaphor I gave you. Verb form is the raw material for verb tenses. If you know the 6 basic verb forms, you know how to write any sentence in any verb tense in English. So, verb tenses are built up of verb forms. Verb tenses are walls. Verb forms, well, verb tenses are sometimes mentions. We have very extended verb tenses in English, complex verb tenses. And verb forms are bricks. They are the raw material for verb tenses. Okay, if you got these 2 pieces of information out of today's class, I think you got the most important information. Okay, so I'd suggest you to watch the class again. If you have any questions, okay, if you have something that was a bit unclear, watch it again. You can always write me an email. But do you have any question for now?
Não.
I'll prepare you some exercises on verb form, verb tenses. I was considering, I'm thinking about it because we would have a kind of examination, a kind of exercise list for the 22nd. Maybe I can send it to you on the 22nd, but you submit to me on the, maybe on the 27th. I'm considering postpone it a little bit, okay? Because I need some more, I think 1 more or 2 more classes to finish the theoretical topics of morphosyntax. I guess next class will be our last theoretical class, and then I'll give you some practice to do at home, okay? So if you have no more questions, I think
Ok.
you can leave, okay? If you have any questions, I'm here to serve you.
Como eu disse, agora eu não me lembro de nenhuma questão. Talvez depois que eu assistir a aula novamente.
All right, so watch the class, write me an email, call me on WhatsApp or something, or ask me next class about your doubts, okay? No problems.
Tá bom,
Ok.
So,
professor.
see you next class.
See you.
See
Have a
ya.
nice morning.
Bye bye.